Good evening, and welcome to the inaugural episode of Mr. Bones' Horror Zone. On tonight's episode, we're going to be doing a list, because YouTube loves lists. Also, as ever, I will be joined by the ghost that lives in my house, Philip. The 5 best modern horror TV series. Now, of course, this is my very correct opinion on the matter. Number 5, The Strain. The Strain's based on a book series, or book trilogy, there's 3 of them, by Guillermo del Toro and Chuck Hogan. Del Toro is probably best known for his horror and dark fantasy movies, and Chuck Hogan's best known for writing some books, I think. I'll be honest, I don't actually know what else he has done. The Strain TV series starts off incredibly well. It's super disturbing and pretty spooky. It definitely helps that the first double-length pilot episode is directed by Guillermo del Toro. But if I'm being perfectly honest, everything after the first season kind of goes down a little bit. That's not to say that it becomes bad. I enjoyed all 4 seasons of The Strain, but the first season is definitely much more horror-oriented than seasons 2 through 4. They sort of take on a more action show with horror elements. But The Strain is about vampires, and a very Guillermo del Toro take on vampires. I don't want to spoil too much. The image that Philip is going to pull up right there for us, thank you, will show you all that you need to know without being super spoiled. Oh, also, the kid character in the show sucks. God, he sucks. He brings down the whole thing. He sucks. Number 4, American Horror Story. I know. It's easily the most popular and most well-known of all of the shows on this list, and it's not number 1 because I personally don't think it should be. Now, it is an anthology show. Each season of American Horror Story is a completely different and mostly isolated story, and that definitely works to its benefit. So does the incredibly strong cast every single season, most of whom carry over from season to season, but I feel like the writing lacks a little bit in every single season. Also, it occasionally is a little more funny than one would expect from a horror anthology series, but then again, so was Tales from the Crypt, and I love Tales from the Crypt, so I guess I can't count off too many points for that. It also has incredibly high production value, which again works in its favor, but maybe these seasons are a bit too long for the stories that each of them are telling. Number 3, Penny Dreadful. Yeah, again, I know what you're thinking. Penny Dreadful is higher on this list than American Horror Story? It is, because this is my show. Penny Dreadful is based on the Victorian-era short horror stories of the same name. Or I guess short's not right. Some of them were. Most of them were incredibly long. Sometimes way too long because authors got paid by the word. So you would have things like Varney the Vampire being well over 1,000 pages. It's not worth reading, don't do it. Penny Dreadfuls were known for being overly gory, and they were sensationalist stories. They were called Penny Dreadfuls because they were cheap and they were scary. And the show mimics that incredibly well. It also helps that it has pretty consistently strong writing and a really strong cast. It also throws in a couple of well-known Victorian-era monsters, Frankenstein and his creature, Dorian Gray, and Dracula, maybe? He comes in the 3rd season, spoilers. It is over the top, that is its nature, in homaging the actual Penny Dreadfuls, but that's not for everyone, and I can understand how a lot of people would want to kind of tune out after that. Also, Dorian Gray is in the 1st season for no real reason. I mean, his character serves a point, but there's no reason for it to be Dorian Gray. I mean, if you're going to include a famous character in there, include him for a reason. Number 2, Stranger Things. What? It's not number 1? No, it's not number 1. It's really good. You guys, I mean, it's also incredibly popular. If I'm telling you this and you're watching this, you've probably seen Stranger Things and know how good it is. The cast is all around fantastic. The writing is super good. The characters are all pretty interesting. It's occasionally genuinely scary, and most of the time, even when it's not scary, it's still got a creepy, Halloween-y sort of vibe to it. However, it is not so much set in the 1980s as it is a huge pastiche of Halloween movies from the 1980s, like Stephen King stories or The Goonies. Honestly, I know everybody compares this to Stephen King. It feels a lot more Goonies than it does King. That doesn't necessarily bring it down, but it does make it a very limited view for the show. It is only ever going to be one thing. I mean, unless they mix it up in future seasons, but again, it's very much an 80s show. And I don't just mean that by it being set in the 80s. And number 1, Channel Zero. Yeah, it's a Sci-Fi Channel original TV show, and I know, but guys, have you watched it? Have you watched it? Channel Zero is, like American Horror Story, an anthology series. Each season is only 6 episodes though, and I personally feel like each season doesn't really flag as far as pacing goes because of that. Each season is based on a creepypasta from the internet, and I know how ridiculous that sounds. Creepypastas are basically internet urban legends. Like, you know, the guy with the hook for a hand, except it's on the internet, Slender Man. It's on the internet. Slender Man. Philip, show him Slender Man. The show actually makes this work incredibly well, and most of the shows on this list have attained true terror a couple of times throughout their run, a couple of episodes, a couple of moments where you're like, oh God, I don't want to go to sleep after watching that. Channel Zero does it consistently. It's genuinely pretty scary. I know your mileage may vary with whether you think something is scary or not, but man, I'm a horror guy, and Channel Zero got me more often than any of the other shows on this list did. It is my number 1 pick for modern horror TV shows. Should definitely check it out if you can. All right, that's going to do it for this week and this inaugural episode. But thanks for joining me. Like, comment, and subscribe because this is a YouTube show. You guys know, you know, you've seen other YouTube shows. Unless I'm your first, that'd be pretty wild. Anyway. Go check out all of these shows if you want. Go check out none of these shows if you want. It doesn't really matter. Thank you for checking me out, though, and I'll see you next week with something else spooky. Until then,